The stench of the city clung to my clothes, seeped into my skin. A year of it now, a year since the world twisted itself into this putrid mockery, and the smell of rot and stagnant water was as familiar as my own breath. Lower Manhattan was a tomb, its towering monuments to greed and power now just hollow shells, jagged teeth against a perpetually bruised sky. I moved with the practiced silence of a ghost, my combat boots barely disturbing the dust and debris that coated the cracked pavement of Wall Street. My heart hammered a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs, a constant reminder that I was still alive, still breathing this poisoned air. My M4 carbine felt light in my hands, a familiar extension of my will. 1 year. 1 year of waking up to silence, to the distant rasping coughs of the hungry dead, to the gnawing certainty that every sunrise brought another day of impossible survival. Today, the mission was simple: retrieve medical supplies from a forgotten cache in the old New York Stock Exchange building. Not simple at all. Nothing was simple anymore. The stock exchange, once a hive of frenetic energy, was now a known hot zone, a funnel for the infected drawn by the echoes of human panic that must have solidified there in the early days. Command had said the intel indicated a manageable population. Manageable was a word they used often at the safe zone, usually right before someone got torn to shreds. I hugged the shadows of what used to be a bustling deli, its glass front long shattered, contents long looted or rotted. The silence was the real horror here, not the groans. The silence meant they were close, hidden, waiting. Or worse, it meant there were so many of them that their individual noises blurred into an oppressive, smothering quiet. A rat, bold and fat, scuttled across a pile of discarded papers, rustling like dead leaves. I tracked it with my eyes, my finger resting lightly on the trigger. Everything was a threat, every shadow, every sound, very moment of calm. Especially the calm. I rounded a corner, my back scraping against cold stone, and peered down Broad Street. The bronze statue of the charging bull stood defiant amidst the desolation, a mockery of strength. Its base was streaked with dark, dried fluids, and something red and pulpy was stuck to one of its horns. I didn't need to guess what. It was a landmark, a grim waypoint. Good, still on track. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of decay that hinted at recent activity. My grip tightened on the M4. I checked the safety, clicked it off. The small sound was swallowed by the vast, empty street. My eyes scanned every window, every doorway, every overturned vehicle that could conceal a lurking horror. Then I saw them. 3 of them, shambling figures in what remained of business suits, their movements jerky, unnatural. They were drawn to something on the far side of the street, something unseen behind a crushed taxi. Their groans were low, guttural, a slow moan. Ocean chorus of the damned. Not a swarm, not yet, just the advance scouts of the inevitable. I took cover behind a derelict bus, its windows blown out, seats ripped apart. My heart picked up its pace, a quickening drumbeat in my chest. 3. I could handle 3, but the question was never if you could handle them, but how many more they would bring. I peered through a gap in the rusted metal. One of them, a woman in a tattered blazer, turned her head slowly, as if sensing my presence. Her eyes were milky white, fixed on nothing. Her jaw worked, a wet clicking sound. Not looking at me, not yet. She was just reacting to the subtle shifts in the air, the way a predator might sense the warmth of prey, even through a barrier. I needed to move, needed to get into that building without drawing attention. The stock exchange was 2 blocks ahead, a squat, imposing structure. Getting to it meant crossing open ground, passing more choked streets, and enduring the constant threat of whatever. Surprises New York still held. My radio crackled, a brief burst of static, then the gruff voice of Finn. "Alex, come in. Sit rep." I pressed the button on my comms unit. "Finn, Broad Street, 3 hostiles observed, moving slow, no contact yet. Intel still indicates clear path to the exchange, but stay alert. Scanners are picking up increased activity in the lower districts, higher than projected." "Higher than projected," I repeated, a bitter taste in my mouth. That was the other phrase they loved. "Understood. Proceeding with caution." "Roger that. Be careful, Alex. We need those meds." "I know." I released the button. "And I need to breathe." The irony was not lost on me. We all needed something. Most of us just needed to make it through the next 5 minutes. I waited for the 3 infected to pass, their shuffling gait agonizingly slow. Each step felt like an hour. When they finally disappeared behind the taxi, I broke cover, moving low and fast, hugging the shadows. My bolted foots crunched on glass. Too loud. I winced, paused, listening. Nothing, just the wind. The silence was a lie. I kept moving, the skeletal remains of trees lining the street like gallows. There were signs of attempts to clear the area, ancient barricades made of overturned cars and furniture, long since breached. Someone had tried to hold this line. Someone had failed. That was the story of New York now. A million small failures, leading to one monumental, suffocating success for the dead. I reached the entrance to the stock exchange. Massive, heavy doors, reinforced with steel plates in the initial weeks, now bent inwards, hinges ripped from their anchors. A crude barricade of desks and chairs lay in shattered pieces, further evidence of a last stand. This wasn't a manageable population. This was a siege. A fresh, coppery smell hit me, thicker than the usual decay. Blood, and a lot of it. My stomach clenched. I had seen enough blood to fill the Hudson, but the fresh smell always glittered. Odd to me, it meant recent kill, recent struggle, recent loss. I slipped through the gap, my rifle up, eyes wide. The grand hall, once filled with the roar of traders, was a cavern of echoes. Dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of sunlight that pierced the grime-coated skylights. Statues stood frozen in dramatic poses, oblivious to the horror. And everywhere, on the marble floor, on the broken desks, on the walls, were dark, sticky stains. Bodies. Not infected. Humans. Torn, twisted, some picked clean to bone. This wasn't a skirmish. This was a massacre. And it wasn't old. The coppery tang in the air confirmed it. A few days, maybe less. My radio crackled again. "Alex, you there? What's your status? Losing you. Lot of interference." "Finn, I'm inside. The intel is bad. Very bad. The main hall is—" I broke off. A low growl, closer than I expected, from behind a partition wall. "Alex, what's happening?" Finn's voice was sharp with concern. I raised a hand, signing for silence, even though he couldn't see me. My eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows. "Hold one. Something's here." The growl again, this time accompanied by a wet sloshing sound. Closer. It wasn't the usual infected moan. This was deeper, more bestial. I crept forward, my boots making no sound. The air grew colder, the hair on my arms prickling. Rounding the partition, I saw it. A single infected, but unlike any I'd seen in a long time. It was massive, bloat-bellied, its skin stretched taut and gray, covered in weeping sores. Its arms were thicker, muscles distended, and its hands ended in crude, bone-like claws. It was tearing into the remains of a corpse, its head buried deep in the chest cavity, pulling out glistening organs. The wet tearing was sickening. My finger found the trigger. I aimed for the head. Even for these specialized variants, the head was always the key. But something felt wrong. This wasn't just a zombie. This was a brute. We'd heard rumors of stronger, faster, more resilient variants. Variants in the deep urban centers, mutants born of the sheer density of the infection. But I'd dismissed them as campfire stories. Until now. I fired 3 quick, controlled bursts. The first round hit its shoulder, tearing a chunk of flesh, but it didn't even flinch. The second grazed its skull, sending bone fragments flying, but the brute just grunted, its head still buried in its meal. The third round, a lucky shot, caught it right in the temple. It finally reacted. Its body convulsed, a deep shudder, and it slowly lifted its head. Its eyes, or what remained of them, were dark pits, devoid of any light. Its jaw hung open, revealing rows of jagged teeth, some broken, some stained red. It let out a deafening roar, a sound that vibrated through the floorboards and rattled the dust from the ceiling. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated, primal rage. My ears rang. My instincts screamed at me, "Run!" But I stood my ground. My blood was up. This wasn't the shuffling death I usually faced. This was a fight. It lunged, faster than anything its size had a right to be, a blur of gray flesh and tearing claws. I brought my rifle up to block, felt the jarring impact as it slammed into me. My feet skidded on the marble, and I crashed against a display case, shattering the glass. The brute was on me, its weight crushing. The putrid smell of its breath was suffocating. I could feel the heat radiating from its festering body. It swiped a claw, tearing a gouge in my flak vest just above my hip. I roared in pain, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. I brought the butt of my rifle up, slammed it into the side of its head, again and again. The brute snarled, but its grip didn't loosen. It was trying to get to my throat. I could feel its hot breath on my neck, its jagged teeth just inches from my jugular. Desperate, I reached for my sidearm, my Glock 19, pulled it from its holster, jammed the muzzle under its chin, and fired. The shot defended me, echoing wildly in the cavernous hall. Black fluid erupted from its neck, spraying over my face, my uniform. The brute staggered, its grip loosening. I fired again and again. 4 shots, all center mass, all into its head. Its body went limp, collapsing onto me, pinning me to the floor. The weight was unbearable. I struggled, pushing with all my might, trying to dislodge the grotesque mass. It was still twitching, its limbs spasming, even in death. "Alex, what was that? Are you hit? Report!" Finn's voice, distorted by static, barely registered. I shoved the brute off, gasping for air, scrambled to my feet. My body ached. My hip burned where the claw had connected, a deep bruise already forming beneath the vest. I could feel a sticky wetness on my cheek, wiped it with the back of my hand. Black fluid, not blood. Its fluid. I gagged. "Alex, talk to me. I'm here," I gasped, my voice hoarse. "I'm here. Contact. Solo. Big one. Brute type. Took 4 headshots from my sidearm." To drop it. A stunned silence from Finn. A brute? In the exchange? Impossible. Our intel. There haven't been confirmed brute sightings in over 6 months, and never this far north. "Well, you can confirm this one," I spat, wiping the fluid from my face with a sleeve, feeling a fresh wave of nausea. It just tried to turn me into lunch. Are you injured? Just bruised, vest held. Mostly. A quick check confirmed the vest was compromised, but the damage was superficial. Lucky. So lucky it felt like a curse. All right, Alex, new priority. Get out of there. That brute means something. If there's one, there's likely more, and they don't operate alone. Forget the meds. Your extraction is priority 1. Negative, Finn. I'm already here. I took out the brute. I'm going for the cash. People need those meds. This is why I'm here. My voice was firmer now, adrenaline sharpening my resolve. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my gut, but it was overshadowed by a grim determination. X, that's not a suggestion. That's an order. We can't risk you. You're too valuable. Get to extraction point Charlie 7 immediately. With all due respect, Finn, this is New York. There are no safe extraction points. And what's valuable mean in this world if it's not saving lives? I'm going for the cash. I cut the comms before he could argue further. I knew he was just doing his job, but I also knew what was at stake. We were running desperately low on several critical medications. Failure wasn't an option. My gaze drifted to the brute's corpse, a grotesque heap of gray flesh. It was already beginning to decompose further, its sores weeping dark pus onto the marble. Its presence here was a bad sign, an actively bad sign. Brutes were usually deep in the tunnels, in the subway systems, where the infection had festered undisturbed for months, creating these abominations. For one to be up here, in a landmark building, suggested a deeper infestation, or a new pattern of movement. I checked my rifle. Half a magazine left. My Glock was full, but I only had one spare magazine for it. Not nearly enough if this place was crawling with brutes. I needed to be smart and fast. The mission parameters changed in my head. No longer a retrieval, but a smash and grab. Get in, get the meds, get out. The building was a labyrinth of shattered offices and darkened corridors. I moved from floor to floor, a ghost in the ruins. Each level was a testament to the chaos that had erupted a year ago. Chairs overturned, monitors smashed, papers scattered like snow. The silence was punctuated by the rhythmic creak of structural stress, the wind whistling through broken windows, and my own ragged breathing. I found scattered infected, the regular kind, in various states of decay. Dispatched them efficiently, silently, with a well-placed headshot or a quick knife to the brainstem. They were slow, predictable, but the brute had changed things. It had introduced a layer of dread, a sense of vulnerability I hadn't felt in months. The cache was supposedly on the 27th floor. I took the stairs, avoiding the elevators, death traps, even if they worked. 27 flights. Each step was a physical and psychological burden. The air grew stale, dust-choked. The only light came from my tactical flashlight, cutting through the gloom. On the 15th floor, I found a barricade that was still mostly intact. A desperate attempt to hold the line, not from below, but from above. This made me pause. Why would they barricade up? I climbed over, rifle leading. The corridor beyond was darker, colder. The usual dust was thicker here, but something else coated the floor. A fine gray powder. Ash? No, too organic, spore-like. My gut tightened. This was wrong. This was very, very wrong. A low hum, not groans, a deep, collective vibration, like 1,000 insects buzzing in unison, coming from above, from the 27th floor. The hum intensified with each flight I climbed. It wasn't just noise. It was a physical presence, a pressure on my eardrums, a tremor in the floor beneath my feet. This wasn't the manageable population Finn had talked about. This was something else, something far more insidious. I reached the 26th floor. The hum was louder here, almost deafening. It resonated through my bones. I paused at the stairwell entrance, heart hammering. I could feel the building breathing with it, a monstrous, unnatural rhythm. I slowly pushed open the fire door to the 27th floor. The air hit me like a physical blow, cold, damp, and the smell. It was the rot, yes, but mixed with something else, something sweet and cloying, like overripe fruit left to fester. The spore-like dust was everywhere here, coating every surface in a thick gray blanket. My flashlight beam cut through the oppressive gloom, revealing a nightmare. This wasn't just a floor. It was a nest. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, packed shoulder to shoulder, not shambling, not groaning randomly. They were pressed against the windows, against the interior walls, their bodies swaying in unison, emitting that low, collective hum. They were silent individually, but together they were a living, breathing, festering monument to death. It was a swarm, an actual, terrifying swarm. They were all facing outward, some pressed against the glass, their faces distorted, jaws open. Others stood deeper in the floor, their backs to me, swaying. And in the center of the largest office space, something pulsed. A darker mass, more concentrated, like the heart of this grotesque organism. It was too much. The sheer density, the unified movement. It was like looking at a tide of dead flesh, a slow-motion tsunami ready to drown the world. My mind struggled to process the scale. A year of fighting, a year of seeing horrors, and nothing had prepared me for this. I backed away slowly, carefully, one step at a time, my breath catching in my throat. My mind screamed at me, "Don't make a sound, don't breathe too loud. They haven't seen you. Don't let them see you." The objective, the medical cache, was somewhere in this room, probably swallowed by the shifting mass of bodies. Impossible to reach, suicidal to try. Finn was right, I should have listened. Then, a small sound. A single loose floorboard creaked under my boot. The hum changed pitch. It rose, becoming a sharper, more agitated whine. My blood ran cold. Dozens of heads, then hundreds, slowly turned. Their empty eyes, once fixed on nothing, now found me. The hum died, replaced by a cacophony of individual moans, a rising tide of hunger and malice. The swaying stopped. The collective shifted. My cover was blown. Panic flared, sharp and sudden. Too many. I couldn't fight this. No one could. "Alex, what's happening? We're getting a massive spike on the heat maps from your location. What the hell is going on?" Fiend's voice was frantic now. I slammed the comms unit. No time to explain. No time to think. Just react. They started. Move. Slow at first, then faster, a ripple spreading through the mass. Hands rose, reaching. Jaws opened, clicking, snapping. The moaning became a roar. I turned and ran, not a tactical retreat, a desperate blind flight. Slamming the fire door shut behind me, I heard the immediate impact of bodies, the splintering wood. Their unified roar, 1,000 hungry voices, echoed through the stairwell. Down, 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 27 flights of stairs. My legs burned, my lungs screamed for air. I didn't look back. The sounds of their pursuit were a physical presence, a wave of noise and decaying flesh crashing against the door, threatening to burst through. I bypassed the 26th floor, 25th, 24th, ignoring the smaller infected I had dispatched earlier. They were irrelevant now. Only the swarm mattered. Only the crushing, overwhelming numbers mattered. On the 15th floor, the old barricade that had once seemed a desperate last stand now felt like a lifeline. It was still there, mostly intact. But the roar from above was closer, reverberating through the stairwell. They were breaking through. I scrambled over the barricade, my rifle clattering against the metal desks. Heart racing, I looked back at the stairwell door. It was bulging inward, groaning under the pressure. Splinters of wood flew as something heavy slammed against it from the other side. No time to secure it. They were too many, too fast. I sprinted down the corridor, the gray spores kicking up around my feet. My hips screamed in protest. Every step was agony, but the fear was a powerful anesthetic. I burst out of the building into the relative calm of Broad Street. The sun, lower now, cast long, distorted shadows. I didn't even register the 3 hostels I'd seen earlier. They were nothing compared to the nightmare I'd just witnessed. But the street wasn't clear. More infected, a few dozen, drawn by the roar, by the distant sound of breaking wood. They turned towards me, their groans rising. "Damn it!" I screamed, raising my rifle. I fired a controlled burst. 3 headshots, 3 down. But more were coming, from the side streets, from behind derelict cars. The city was waking up, drawn to the violence, to the promise of flesh. My extraction point, Charlie 7, was 3 blocks north, near Trinity Church. An open area, supposedly clear. Now, it felt like a trap. I ran, weaving between abandoned vehicles, dodging grasping hands, firing short bursts when necessary. My rifle was getting lighter, my ammunition count dwindling. Each shot was a precious resource. Each kill bought me seconds, not safety. The ringing in my ears hadn't stopped. The black fluid on my face felt like a brand. The image of that living, pulsing swarm, packed together in the stock exchange, was seared into my mind. It wasn't just a collection of individuals. It was something else. Organized, or simply, horrifyingly, a unified entity of death. I reached the corner of Broadway and Wall. Trinity Church, its spire reaching to the sky, was visible. But so were the infected, dozens of them, shambling towards the churchyard, towards the supposed extraction point. Finn's intel, already flawed, was now actively dangerous. The hum, I heard it again, faint but distinct, not from the stock exchange, from further north, from the direction of my extraction. My heart sank, my legs faltered. No, it couldn't be, not another one. But it was. The hum grew louder, carried on the wind. It was coming from the churchyard itself. I was trapped, caught between the immediate threat of the street infected and whatever new horror awaited me at the extraction point. My rifle clicked empty. The last round had dropped a charging runner. I slapped in a fresh magazine, my hands fumbling, adrenaline making my fingers clumsy. This wasn't just fighting the zombie swarm. This was fighting New York. And New York, it seemed, was fighting back with every dead soul it held. I ducked behind a derelict hot dog stand. Tanned, the smell of stale grease mingling with the pervasive decay. My breath came in ragged gasps. Sweat stung my eyes. My hip throbbed with a dull ache. My comms unit suddenly burst to life. Alex, status report. We're seeing a massive localized swarm formation around Trinity Church. Repeat, Trinity Church. Do not proceed to Charlie 7. It's a full-scale concentration. We're pulling out. Get clear. Get to the bridges, any bridge. We're redirecting aerial support to clear a path, but you're on your own for now. Finn's voice was raw with panic. A full-scale concentration. Another swarm. This was worse than I thought. They weren't just random. They were gathering. The bridges, my only way out. Manhattan was an island, a prison of concrete and flesh. The Brooklyn Bridge was my closest option, maybe a mile east. A mile through this hellscape with 2 swarms closing in? I looked at my remaining ammunition. 1 rifle magazine, 1 pistol magazine. Not enough. Not nearly enough. The low hum from Trinity Church intensified. It was a living sound, a monstrous vibration that promised annihilation. And from the direction of the stock exchange, I could hear a rising chorus of moans. They were still coming for me. I was a single, fragile human caught between 2 rising tides of the dead, in a city that had long ago forgotten the meaning of life. My options were simple: succumb or fight like hell. A year ago, I would have surrendered to despair. A year ago, I wouldn't have known what to do. But a year in New York had taught me one thing: you keep moving, you keep fighting. Even when it's hopeless, you fight, because there's always a chance, always a sliver of light in the darkness. I pushed off the hot dog stand, gripping my rifle. My legs burned, but they moved. My heart pounded, but it kept beating. "Finn," I whispered into the comms, knowing he wouldn't hear me, "I'm going for the Brooklyn Bridge. Tell the others. I'll try to make it." Then I ran, straight into the maw of the city, towards the bridge, towards the faint hope of escape, leaving the silent, humming horror of Trinity Church behind me, and the growing, roaring tide of the stock exchange at my back. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was a race. And the prize was my very last breath. The asphalt beneath my feet turned to a river of glass and debris as I cut through a collapsed intersection near Federal Hall. The statue of George Washington, hand raised, seemed to be warning me away. Or maybe, just maybe, offering a final, futile blessing. The air shimmered with the heat of distant, uncontrolled fires, painting the ruined skyscrapers in shades of angry orange and bruised purple. It was beautiful in a horrifying, apocalyptic way. My focus narrowed to a tunnel vision of survival. Every broken window was a potential threat, every pile of rubble a hiding place for something waiting to spring. The ambient moaning of the city was a constant low thrum, like a monstrous heart beating irregularly. But now it was overlaid with the distinct, agitated sounds of infected reacting to the distant hums of the larger swarms. A low, almost panicked clacking of jaws, a quickening shuffle. They were like fish in a pond sensing a storm. I was moving east now, towards Water Street. The financial district gave way to more commercial and residential ruins. Overturned yellow cabs were skeletal husks, their paint faded, tires flat. I passed by the remains of a clothing store, mannequins frozen in impossible poses, their plastic smiles mocking the utter devastation. Suddenly, a loud crash. From above, I instinctively ducked behind a charred car. A section of facade from an apartment building directly across the street had given way, showering the pavement with bricks, glass, and twisted rebar. The noise was deafening, echoing for what felt like an eternity. And then, the immediate consequence. The infected reacted, of course, not just those nearby, but hundreds of them, from several blocks away. The sheer volume of the sound, the vibrations through the ground, acted like a beacon. The moaning intensified, coalescing into a wave of sound that washed over me. A dozen of them were already shambling towards the site of the collapse, their movements jerky, almost eager. More were pouring out of side streets, converging on the epicenter of the noise. I was directly in their path, caught in the current. My mind raced. I couldn't just run through them, not this many. and getting around them would mean a detour, putting me further behind schedule, closer to being trapped by the main swarms. I scanned for an alternate route. A narrow alleyway between two buildings, almost entirely choked with refuse, looked like a possible escape. But it was dark and blind. A high risk, but perhaps my only option. I decided. I broke cover, sprinted towards the alley, firing a quick burst from my M4 at the two closest infected. They dropped, their momentum carrying them forward into a heap. The rest were distracted by the fresh sound of gunfire, turning their dead eyes towards me. I plunged into the alley, the putrid smell hitting me instantly. Garbage, decay, and something else, something metallic and sweet. The air was thick, suffocating. My tactical light cut through the gloom, revealing a tunnel of overflowing dumpsters, rusted fire escapes, and broken pipes. It was a tight squeeze. I scraped against grimy brick walls, my uniform snagging on protruding metal. Behind me, the moaning grew louder, closer. They were trying to get into the alley. I could hear their desperate, frustrated sounds as they squeezed against the narrow opening, their numbers too great for the small space. Then, a new sound, a frantic scratching, a low growl. Not from behind me, from ahead. My heart leaped into my throat. The alley wasn't empty. I froze, my breath held captive. My flashlight beam wavered, then steadied, sweeping ahead. And there it was. Not one, two. Of them, both emaciated, their skin stretched tight over visible bones, their clothes tattered strips. They were smaller, faster variants, skinnies we call them. They moved with a disturbing, almost insect-like twitchiness, clambering over a pile of trash bags. They were looking at me, their heads tilted, their empty eye sockets seeming to bore into my soul. They didn't moan, they hissed, a dry, rasping sound that promised a swift, brutal end. I didn't hesitate. 2 quick shots to each head. The skinnies dropped, twitching for a moment before going still, collapsing into the trash heap. The muffled pops of my rifle were deafening in the enclosed space. The gunfire was a terrible mistake. The sound, amplified by the alley walls, reverberated outward, piercing the collective awareness of the infected on the street. Their frustrated sounds at the alley mouth turned to a furious, agitated roar. I could hear them slamming against the entrance, trying to force their way in. And on deeper within the alley, a response. More scratching, more hissing. Damn it! I cursed under my breath. I had walked straight into a nest. I moved faster, scrambling over the trash, my boots slipping on something wet and slick. My shoulder screamed as I squeezed past the particularly narrow section between a dumpster and a fire escape ladder. My flashlight beam picked up more movement. Figures emerging from the deeper shadows, from beneath sagging tarpaulins, from behind overflowing recycling bins. Skinnies. 3, 4, 5. Their emaciated forms were almost impossible to distinguish from the surrounding debris, until their heads twitched, their bony hands reaching. They were faster than the normal shamblers, but still fragile. I fired, dropping one. The second one lunged, its skeletal fingers brushing my arm. I brought the M4 up, blocking its attack, then slammed the rifle butt into its face. Bone crunched, and it went down. The third and fourth were almost on me. I changed tactics. No time for careful aiming. I fired from the hip, a spray of bullets, hitting one in the chest, the other in the leg. They staggered, giving me just enough time to duck past them. The fifth one, its movements a blur, launched itself from a pile of cardboard boxes. It was on me before I could react, its weight throwing me off balance. We crashed to the ground, the impact jarring my teeth. The alley stank of rot and fear. Its face was inches from mine. emaciated, leathery skin. Its mouth, a wide, gaping maw, filled with needle-sharp teeth, snapped at my face. I brought my arm up, blocking its bite, felt its teeth scrape against my sleeve, tearing fabric. Its strength, despite its thin frame, was terrifying. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound, fueled by desperation. I wrestled with it, trying to get my pistol free. It was surprisingly strong, its grip like iron. I could feel its nails digging into my shoulder, through the uniform. My vision blurred. The adrenaline was afire in my veins. I headbutted it, feeling the sharp impact of its skull against mine. It recoiled, just for a second. My hand found the grip of my Glock. I pulled it free, pressed the muzzle against its temple, and fired. The shot roared in the confined space. Black fluid and bone fragments splattered against the brick wall. The skinny went limp, collapsing onto me, its weight surprisingly light. I shoved it off, gasping for air, scrambled to my knees, then to my feet. My arm throbbed, a sharp, searing pain where its teeth had scraped. I checked the wound. Not a bite, just a deep scratch, but still a chilling reminder of how close I'd come. The fabric of my sleeve was torn, showing a raw red line on my forearm. I couldn't afford to be careless. Even a scratch could turn into something worse if left untreated. But there was no time for medical attention now, only escape. My rifle clicked empty. The magazine was dry. I had 2 magazines for my pistol. That was it. My ammunition stores were critically low. This was bad, very bad. The alley opened into a wider cross street, and there, looming in the twilight, was the Brooklyn Bridge, its iconic cable stretching like skeletal arms into the darkening sky, a beacon of hope, a symbol of escape. But between me and the bridge was a sea of them. Not a swarm, not yet, but dozens, hundreds, flowing down the street, drawn by the sounds of the collapse, the gunfire, the desperate screams of the living. And from the direction of Trinity Church, I could still hear that low, collective hum, growing louder, closer. The wind shifted, and I caught a whiff of the cloying, sweet smell of decay, stronger than before. They were moving. I was out of the frying pan and into the fire, twice over. I pressed myself against the side of the building, peering around the corner. The street was impassable. Not only were there too many infected, but the route was choked with burning vehicles, overturned buses, and massive construction. Ratters in the road from what looked like previous military shelling. "Damn it," I breathed, my voice hoarse. My heart was a frantic bird in my chest, beating a desperate rhythm. My eyes scanned the landscape. The bridge was close, tantalizingly so, but the path was blocked. I had to find an alternate route, up. I looked at the buildings around me. Tall, derelict apartment blocks, office buildings. Most of their windows were shattered, their interiors dark and empty. But some still had fire escapes clinging precariously to their brick facades. A fire escape. High risk. But what wasn't now? I picked one that looked relatively stable, attached to a 6-story building. It was maybe 50 feet down the block, past another cluster of infected. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to calm my racing pulse. Focus. Always focus. Panic kills. "All right, Alex," I muttered to myself, adjusting my grip on my now useless M4, holding it like a club. My Glock was in my hand, ready. Time to go vertical. I launched myself from cover, sprinting, head down, weaving through the chaos. 2 infected lunged from a broken doorway. I fired twice, dropping them both with headshots. The noise was like a flare, drawing more attention. "Hey, over here!" a voice shouted from somewhere to my right. My head snapped up. Another survivor? In this part of the city? A figure emerged from the shadows of an alley, waving frantically. A man. Mid-30s, wearing scavenged tactical gear, a faded baseball cap pulled low. He was holding a battered pump-action shotgun. "Over here! Come on!" he yelled again, firing his shotgun into a cluster of infected that were closing in on him. The blast was loud, drawing even more attention. This was either a trap or a desperate act of camaraderie. In this world, it was usually the former. But the sheer recklessness of his presence, the fact that he was yelling, it felt genuine. I didn't have time to evaluate. My path to the fire. Escape was clear. I was already committed. "Forget me!" I yelled back, not slowing my pace. "Go for the bridge! They're coming for the bridge!" But he didn't listen. He moved towards me, laying down suppressive fire with his shotgun, drawing the attention of the infected away from my path. A selfless or foolish act. "The building! Climb! I'll cover you!" he shouted. His cover fire was effective. The infected, drawn by the sound, turned their attention to him. He was a distraction, a sacrifice. "No!" I yelled, but he just grinned, a wild, desperate look on his face. He kept firing, pushing them back, buying me precious seconds. I reached the fire escape. The metal was rusted, some of the rungs bent, but it held. I started to climb, pulling myself up, my muscles screaming in protest. My wounded arm throbbed, but I ignored it. Below me, the man was still fighting. His shotgun boomed, a steady rhythm against the cacophony of moans. He was buying me time. He was giving me a chance. I reached the second-story landing, then the third. My eyes scanned the interior of the building, looking for an entry point. A window, slightly ajar, was my only option. I kicked it open, shards of glass raining inwards, and pulled myself into the darkened apartment. The air was still, dusty. The faint outlines of furniture, shrouded in white sheets, stood like ghosts in the gloom. I moved quickly to the window, peering down. The man was still fighting. He had retreated a few feet, now backed up against a locked storefront. Infecteds were swarming him, a tide of gray flesh and grasping hands. He fired his last shell, the shotgun clicking empty. He swung it like a club, taking down one, but two more were on him. "No!" I screamed, uselessly. He looked up, met my eyes. He smiled, a final, defiant grin. Then he was gone, swallowed by the mass of dead. A moment of profound, cold horror settled over me. He had sacrificed himself for me, a complete stranger. My eyes burned, a fresh wave of fury, cold and sharp, washed over the despair. I wouldn't let his sacrifice be in vain. I turned from the window, my pistol now clutched in both hands. The building was dark, a potential maze of unknown horrors, but it was a path, and I was going to take it. My objective was clear: traverse the rooftops, make it to the bridge, and survive. For him, for Finn, for everyone who was still fighting. The apartment was a wreck, but not disturbed by the infected. It seemed they hadn't breached this far up. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that cut through the grime-streaked windows. The air was stale, the silence thick, broken only by my own ragged breathing and the distant, muffled sounds of the apocalypse outside. I moved with extreme caution, clearing each room before proceeding. The psychological horror of these spaces, once vibrant homes, was almost as unsettling as facing the infected. Personal effects lay scattered: a child's toy on a faded rug, a half-eaten meal, and a kitchen counter, a family photo still upright on a bookshelf, smiling faces frozen in a time that no longer existed. These were ghosts of the world we lost, silent witnesses to the swift, brutal end. On the 5th floor, I found a body, not infected. A man, slumped in an armchair, a pistol still clutched in his skeletal hand, a single dark stain on the wall behind his head. a self-inflicted end. I couldn't judge him. Many had chosen that path. It was a choice, at least, a final, desperate act of control in a world utterly devoid of it. I took his pistol, an old .38 revolver. Only 2 rounds left in the cylinder. Not much, but every bullet counted. I also found a few cans of stale peaches and a bottle of lukewarm water. The peaches were tasteless, a gooey metallic sweetness, but I forced them down. Fuel. The water was a godsend. My throat was raw, parched. I reached the rooftop access door on the 6th floor. It was a heavy steel door, but the lock was broken, hanging limply on its housing. A fresh wave of dread washed over me. Had someone been up here recently? Or worse, had something? I pushed the door open slowly, my pistol up. A blast of wind hit me, carrying with it the sounds and smells of the city. The rooftop was a vast, open expanse of tar and gravel. Air conditioning units, antenna, and maintenance sheds dotted the landscape. The sky was a deeper shade of bruised purple now, streaks of orange fading on the horizon. Night was coming, and with night, new terrors. My eyes immediately swept the rooftop, no obvious movement. Just the constant, guttural moaning rising from the streets below, and the unsettling hum from Trinity Church, now even louder, more menacing, like a demonic choir warming up for a dreadful performance. The Brooklyn Bridge, a majestic skeletal outline, was tantalizingly close, maybe 3 rooftops away. It stretched across the East River, a dark artery connecting this dying island to the promise of the mainland. But between me and the bridge were the gaps, the alleys and streets that separated the buildings. I couldn't jump that far. I needed to cross them. I moved cautiously across the rooftop, keeping low, using the air conditioning units for cover. The wind whipped at my hair, carrying dust and debris. My heart hammered. This was exposed, too exposed. I reached the edge of the first building. Below, the street was still swarming, but the concentration was shifting, flowing eastward, drawn by the distant hum from the bridge. Good, they were moving away from my immediate path. The gap to the next building was about 20 feet, too far to jump. I scanned the adjacent building for a fire escape, a connecting ladder, anything. Nothing, just a sheer drop. Damn it, I muttered. My options were dwindling. Then I saw it, a single thin steel cable strung between the 2 buildings. It was a leftover from some construction project, now rusted and frayed. It sagged precariously in the middle, but it looked like it could hold my weight, maybe. High risk, but what other choice did I have? Go back down into the street? Fight my way through the horde? That was certain death. This was at least a chance. I tested the cable, pulling on it gently. It creaked, but held. I took a deep breath. This was it. I slung my M4 over my back, making sure it was secure. Gripping the cable with both hands, I swung my legs over the edge, feeling the terrifying rush of open air beneath me. The cable groaned under my weight, swaying gently. My stomach lurched. Hand over hand, I pulled myself across the gap, my muscles screaming in protest. The metal was cold, rough, digging into my palms. My wounded arm protested, sending sharp stabs of pain up to my shoulder, but I gritted my teeth and pushed through it. Midway across, the cable swayed violently. My heart leaped into my throat. I looked down. The street below was a blurry mosaic of moving, moaning bodies. One slip, and it was over. Game over. I closed my eyes. Eyes for a second, pushed the image away. Focus. Just focus on the cable, on the next handhold. I made it. My boots hit the tar roof of the next building with a thud. I collapsed onto my hands and knees, gasping for breath, my body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. My hands were raw, bleeding. But I was across. 1 hurdle down, 2 more to go. I got to my feet, shaking. The hum from the bridge was closer now, louder, and the constant moaning from the streets below was an oppressive blanket of sound. I continued my rooftop journey, moving faster now, fueled by the desperate hope of escape. The sun had finally dipped below the horizon, plunging the city into a terrifying twilight. Shadows stretched, danced, making every object seem to move, to hide a threat. The next gap was smaller, maybe 10 feet. I could jump that. I took a running start, launching myself across. My boots scraped on the edge of the other roof, but I landed, stumbled, and kept going. The Brooklyn Bridge was directly in front of me now, a massive, imposing structure, its famous Gothic towers reaching into the dim sky. Its cables, once a symbol of human ingenuity, now felt like the bars of a cage. But then I saw it, the source of the hum, the true horror that awaited me on the bridge. They were there, thousands of them, a solid, pulsating mass of infected, covering the entire width of the bridge, from one end to the other. Not just wandering, they were moving, slowly, relentlessly, towards Manhattan. A tide of the dead, flowing across the river, drawn by some unseen force, some primal urge. The hum was deafening now, a collective sound generated by the sheer density of their numbers, a low, guttural vibration that resonated through the very structure of the bridge. It wasn't just a noise, it was the sound of a living, breathing, monstrous entity. My blood ran cold. My mind screamed in protest. This wasn't an escape route. This was a death trap, a highway to hell. Alex, do you copy? You have to divert. The bridge is impassable. Repeat, the bridge is crawling. We're seeing estimates of over 50,000 hostiles concentrated on it. You can't cross. Divert. Get off the bridge. Alex, do you hear me? Finn's voice, frantic and desperate, crackled in my ear. I stared at the horror unfolding before me, the endless river of dead flesh flowing towards me, and a profound sense of despair settled over me. 50,000, a number too large to comprehend, too vast to fight. It was like trying to stop the ocean with a shovel. I see it, Finn, I whispered, my voice choked with despair. I see it. I looked around frantically. Where else? Another bridge? The Manhattan Bridge? Too far. The Holland Tunnel? Suicide. The river? I couldn't swim that far, not with a wounded arm, not with the freezing current, not with whatever lurked beneath the murky water. I was trapped, truly trapped. The island was sealed. The bridges were swarms. The tunnels were death. My eyes fixed. Pell on a small, dark shape in the distance, barely visible against the backdrop of the dying city. A boat. No, a ferry. One of the old Staten Island ferries, beached on the Manhattan shore, maybe a mile or two south. It was a long shot, a very, very long shot, but it was a shot. Finn, I said, my voice firmer now, a new resolve hardening my tone. The Brooklyn Bridge is a no-go. I'm heading south, Staten Island Ferry Terminal. I'll try to find a way off this island by water. A brief pause, then Finn's voice, sounding utterly defeated. Alex, that's almost a straight shot through the densest part of the city. You're talking about covering maybe 2 miles through absolute hell. It's too much. The concentration of hostiles is just, it's impossible. Impossible is what we do now, Finn, I replied, a grim smile touching my lips. Tell the others. Tell them I'm coming home, one way or another. I cut the comms again, before he could argue. My pistol was in my hand, my empty M4 still slung over my back, a useless club. My legs were trembling, my body aching, my mind teetering on the edge of utter despair. But I was not broken, not yet. The bridge hummed, the city groaned, and I, Alex, a single, insignificant human, turned south. towards the deeper, darker heart of the nightmare, towards the last, desperate chance. The night was falling fast, wrapping the city in a blanket of oppressive darkness. My tactical flashlight was a meager comfort, cutting a weak, bobbing beam through the gloom. The hum from the Brooklyn Bridge was a constant low drone behind me, a reminder of the impossible wall of flesh I had just escaped. But ahead, the sounds of the city were even more agitated. The constant groaning of the local infected was punctuated by distant crashes, the rattle of loose metal, and the occasional sharp crack of gunfire. Other survivors, or military attempts at containment. Either way, it meant heightened danger. I navigated the rooftops, moving slower than usual. Conserving energy. Each jump, each climb was a conscious effort. My hands were scraped raw, my muscles screamed. The adrenaline that had propelled me through the stock exchange and across the cables was draining, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. The path south was a descent into an even deeper level of urban decay. The buildings were older here, their brick facades crumbling, their fire escapes rusted webs that looked ready to collapse with a strong gust of wind. I kept my eyes peeled for any sign of a safer route, any way to avoid the ground-level inferno that awaited me. On the third rooftop, I found something. A crude shelter built into an old water tower, made from scavenged sheets of corrugated metal and tarpaulins. Smoke stains around a makeshift chimney suggested recent occupation. I crept closer, pistol raised, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm. "Hello?" I called out softly, my voice hoarse. "Anyone here?" Silence, just the wind whistling through the gaps, in the metal, and the distant moaning. I approached cautiously, pushing aside a flapping tarp. Inside, it was small, cramped, a bedroll on the floor, a few empty ration packs, and a collection of salvaged tools. And on a small, overturned crate, a worn, leather-bound journal. I picked it up. The cover was scarred, stained. I opened it. The handwriting was neat, precise, but the words were filled with a raw, desperate honesty. Day 287. Still alone. Ran out of ammo for the rifle today. Only have the pistol now. The infected are getting smarter. Not truly smarter, not thinking, but they're gathering. Not just drawn to noise, but almost flowing, like water, always seeking the path of least resistance. And they seem to be focusing on the bridgeheads. Day 295. Saw something new today. A brute, north of Herald Square. Massive. Took down an entire patrol by itself. These aren't the shamblers from the movies. These are evolving, and they're terrifying. Day 310. The hum. It's growing. They're gathering on the Brooklyn Bridge, hundreds of thousands. Heard it on the radio, some scrambled military frequency. They're calling it the Great Migration. They don't know why, just that they're moving towards the mainland. If they get through, it's over. Everything. Day 320. My supplies are almost gone. Tried to make it to the Staten Island ferry terminal. The streets were impassable. Swarms everywhere. Smaller, localized swarms, but still too many to fight alone. Had to turn back. Saw some movement on the river. Maybe small boats? But how to get to them? Day 330. Food almost gone. Water is low. The hum is constant now, even from here. My mind feels like it's fraying. The loneliness is a sickness. I miss my wife. My kids. God, I miss them so much. Day 331. This is it. I can't keep fighting. I'm tired, so tired. I left some rations in the compartment behind the loose panel on the south side. Whoever finds this, Good luck. Fight. Don't give up. Don't be like me. May God have mercy on our souls. The entry stopped there. No name, just a final desperate plea from a ghost. My own situation mirrored his almost perfectly. The brutes, the swarms on the bridge, the desperate, impossible push towards the ferry. I found the loose panel. Behind it, 3 cans of beef stew, a small pouch of dried fruit, and a half-full bottle of whiskey. A grim inheritance. The stew was cold, tasteless, but I ate it. The dried fruit was a luxury. The whiskey, I capped it, shoved it into my pack. For later. Or never. The journal hit me hard. It was a mirror reflecting my own potential future. A year of fighting, and what had it truly achieved? I was still alone, still bleeding, still running. The sheer scale of the enemy, its relentless, evolving nature, was crushing. A fresh wave of despair washed over me. What was the point? Why keep fighting when the odds were so utterly stacked against us? The planet was dead. We were just the last few rats clinging to a sinking ship. No, not yet. I thought of Finn, of the man who sacrificed himself for me, of the faces back at the safe zone, the children whose lives depended on those medical supplies. I couldn't give up, not when they were counting on me, not when I still had a breath left in my body. I closed the journal, placing it carefully back where I found it. A silent promise. I would fight. I wouldn't be like him. I climbed out of the shelter, the darkness almost complete now. The moon, a sliver of silver, cast long, eerie shadows across the rooftops. The city was a jagged silhouette against the bruised sky. I picked up my M4, slung it across my chest. My pistol was in my hand, ready. My body was aching, my mind exhausted, but a flicker of grim resolve hardened my features. The ferry terminal was still miles away. Miles through the unknown, miles through the dark, and whatever horrors the night would bring. I started moving again, faster now, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose. Every step was a prey. Every shadow a threat. This was New York, and this was my fight, and I would keep fighting until my last breath. As I moved deeper south, the character of the city changed. The tall, gleaming towers of the financial district gave way to a denser, older urban landscape. Tenement buildings with fire escapes like rusted skeletons, forgotten warehouses, small commercial blocks. This part of Manhattan had always been a maze, even in the old world. Now it was a death trap. The rooftops here were more disjointed, with wider gaps, making traversal difficult. I was forced to descend to street level more often, navigating narrow alleys and debris-strewn streets. The sounds of the infected were omnipresent now, a constant low growl that grated on my nerves. They were more numerous, less distracted, their movements seemingly more coordinated. My flashlight beam was a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. Every corner I turned felt like stepping into an ambush. The air was thick, with the smell of wet garbage, stagnant water, and the cloying sweetness of rot. I found myself on what used to be a busy market street, now a graveyard of overturned stalls and shattered produce crates. The ground was slick with rotting vegetables, and something darker, stickier. A dozen infected milled aimlessly, their heads twitching, their moans echoing between the brick buildings. I needed to cross, quickly. I aimed my pistol. 3 headshots. 3 infected dropped, their bodies collapsing into the rotting debris. The shots were loud, sharp cracks in the night. The others reacted, turning, slowly converging. I sprinted, weaving around the stalls, trying to make as little noise as possible. But the ground was treacherous. My boot slid on a squashed pumpkin, and I almost went down. I caught myself, regained my footing, and kept running. More infected emerged from a side alley, their arms outstretched, their moans rising in pitch. I fired 2 more rounds, dropping the closest, buying myself precious seconds. My pistol clicked empty. No time to reload. I brought my M4 up, holding it like a club. A large, burly infected, its uniform tattered, lunged at me. I swung the M4, connecting with a sickening thud against its jaw. It reeled, but didn't fall. Its head snapped back, eyes fixed on me, and it came again. I swung again, this time aiming for the head. The metal stock crushed its temple. It dropped, convulsing. More were coming. The market street was filling up. I was surrounded. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light from above, a spotlight, and the whir of helicopter blades growing rapidly louder. "Down! Get down!" a voice boomed from a loudspeaker, distorted by static. "Designated clear path in Sector 7 Delta. Move! Move! Move!" Military. Fins. Aerial support. The spotlight swept across the market street, illuminating the chaos. The infected, caught in the harsh light, paused, their heads tilting, disoriented. This was my chance. I dropped to one key, knee covering my head as the helicopter descended, its powerful rotors kicking up a storm of dust and debris. From its side, 2 M249 light machine guns opened fire. The roar was deafening, a relentless stream of tracers tearing through the infected. Bodies disintegrated, spread across the stalls, the street. Chaos erupted. The remaining infected, caught between the overwhelming firepower and their own primal confusion, scattered, some falling, some stumbling blindly into the hail of bullets. "Move, now!" the voice from the loudspeaker screamed. I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted through the freshly cleared path, dodging falling bodies and debris. The air was thick with smoke, dust, and the acrid smell of burnt flesh. I reached the end of the market street, adrenaline surging. The helicopter hovered above, providing cover fire, its spotlight fixed on my path. It was a lifeline, a fleeting moment of divine intervention in this godless city. I ran for another 2 blocks, thinking 1 foot. Machine gun fire ripping through the air behind me, until the helicopter pulled up, ascending into the night sky, its lights disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. The sound of its rotors faded, replaced by the ringing in my ears and the re-emerging symphony of moans from the surviving infected. The brief reprieve was over. But I had gained crucial ground, and more importantly, a renewed surge of hope. They hadn't forgotten me. They were still fighting for me, for us. My legs were heavy, each step an effort. My lungs burned, but I pushed through the pain, fueled by that flickering hope. The ferry terminal. I could almost taste the salt in the air now. Or maybe it was just the metallic tang of fear and exhaustion. I reached a small, abandoned park. The trees, skeletal and devoid of leaves, cast eerie shadows. The grass was overgrown, concealing whatever horrors lay beneath. I knew this park. It was close, very close to the terminal. But as I moved into the park, the sounds changed again. No longer just moans and shuffles. A low, constant scraping sound, like claws on stone, and a deeper, more resonant growl. My blood ran cold. Brutes, again. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing the source of the sound. Not 1, but 3 of them. Massive, hulking figures, their gray skin glistening, their movements slow and ponderous, but radiating an immense, terrifying power. They were tearing at the base of an old stone fountain, presumably attracted by some long-dead, trapped animal. 3 brutes, and my pistol was empty. My rifle was empty. The revolver had only 2 rounds. I was practically unarmed. This was it. This was the end. My desperate push for the ferry, for escape, had led me straight into the maw of death. I backed away slowly, silently, trying not to draw their attention, but it was too late. One of them, its head slowly lifting from the fountain, turned its milky white eyes towards me. It let out a low, guttural growl, a sound. It vibrated through the very ground. The other two reacted, their massive bodies slowly turning, their heavy footsteps shaking the earth. They had seen me, and they were hungry. My mind raced, frantically searching for an option, a weapon, a path, anything. Then I remembered the whiskey, the journal, the desperate survivor who had perished in that rooftop shelter. Don't be like me. I wasn't like him, not yet. I dropped my empty rifle, letting it clatter to the ground. They reacted to the sound, their groans rising, their movements quickening. I pulled the bottle of whiskey from my pack. It was a long shot, a very, very long shot, but I had to try. My last 2 rounds in the revolver, 1 shot to light it, 1 for an emergency. I uncapped the bottle, splashing a small amount on the torn sleeve of my shirt, then on a handful of dry leaves I quickly gathered from the ground. My hands trembled, but my resolve was cold and clear. The brutes were closing in, their massive bodies casting monstrous shadows in the pale moonlight. Their heavy footsteps shook the ground. Their growls intensified, a chorus of primal hunger. I raised the revolver, took aim at the whiskey-soaked leaves, and fired. The shot was a sharp crack in the silent park. A small flame erupted, licking at the leaves, then at my sleeve. The brutes paused, confused by the sudden light, the unexpected fire. Their heads tilted. I hurled the bottle of whiskey. It sailed through the air, spinning, and smashed against the chest of the closest brute. The glass shattered, splashing its contents over its gray, festering skin. The flame from my sleeve had caught. I screamed, not in pain, but in rage, and with my burning hand, I struck out, touching the whiskey-soaked brute. A flash, a roar. The brute erupted in flames. The alcohol, highly flammable, caught instantly, turning the grotesque monster into a living torch. It roared in agony, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain, and thrashed wildly, its burn, arms flailing, its massive body stumbling. The other 2 brutes reacted, startled and confused by the sudden inferno. They backed away, their growls turning to agitated snarls, momentarily distracted by their burning companion. This was my chance. I ignored the searing pain in my hand, ignored the rising terror. I turned and ran, not towards the terminal, but around the brutes, towards a break in the park wall I'd spotted. The burning brute thrashed, slamming into the other 2. They snarled, confused, snapping at each other, momentarily consumed by the chaos. I cleared the park wall, landing heavily on the pavement on the other side. My hand was burning. I stumbled, caught myself, and kept running. The ferry terminal was just ahead, a dark, hulking structure against the backdrop of the river. But as I ran, I heard it. Not the brutes, something else. A low, collective groan. A familiar hum. From the ferry terminal itself. From the beached ferry. No, not again. My heart sank. Chink. I knew what it meant. Another swarm. Drawn to the massive hulk of the ferry. Drawn to the promise of, what? Escape? A new feeding ground? My hope, so recently rekindled, flickered and died. I was truly trapped. The city was a cage, and every exit was sealed by a wall of the dead. I reached the terminal entrance, a massive glass-fronted structure, now shattered and scarred. Through the broken windows, I could see them, hundreds of them, packed inside, pressed against the remaining glass, their collective moan a deafening roar, and beyond them, the beached ferry, a colossal dark shape, also covered in them, thousands. Another migration. My hand was still burning. The pain was excruciating. My vision blurred. I was at the end of my rope. My ammunition was gone. My strength was gone. My hope was gone. I slumped against a concrete pillar, defeated. The sounds of the swarms, the groans, the hum, the distant gunfire, all merged into a single overwhelming symphony of death. This was it. This was the end of the line. The city had finally won. I pulled out the last bullet from my revolver, the single, cold piece of metal glinting in the faint moonlight. For myself, or for one last fight? My eyes fell on the dark, murky waters of the East River, churning beneath the docks. And then I saw it, a glint, a small, dark shape, bobbing gently on the waves. A dinghy, a small, inflatable boat tied to a decaying pier, almost entirely submerged, almost completely hidden by the debris. A flicker, a tiny, desperate spark of hope. Not a boat, not a ferry, just a dinghy, a rubber raft, barely big enough for one, but it was a chance. My last chance. I pushed myself off the pillar, ignoring the pain, ignoring the exhaustion. My legs felt like lead, but they moved. My eyes fixed on the dinghy, my new, impossible destination. It was still a fight, against the hundreds inside the terminal, against the thousands on the ferry, against the remaining brute still searching. Guy in the park behind me, against the crushing despair in my own heart. But I would take it. I would fight until my very last breath. The last bullet, it wasn't for me. It was for the fight, and I had one left. I started moving towards the dinghy, one step at a time, 1 minute at a time, one breath at a time. This wasn't the end, not yet. The terminal's main hall was a sprawling, multi-level space designed for thousands of commuters. Now it was a funnel of the dead, a feeding ground. The beached ferry, the spirit of America, was directly visible through the massive shattered windows, a hulking monument to a forgotten world, now teeming with its new, grotesque passengers. I was at ground level, hidden behind an overturned kiosk that once sold overpriced coffee. The air inside the terminal was thick with the concentrated stench of decay, a suffocating miasma. The sheer number of infected was staggering. They weren't just milling, they were swaying, reacting to the hum from the ferry, a low, guttural vibration that resonated through the concrete floor. It was like an ant colony, teeming with relentless, mindless activity. My objective? The dinghy, tied to a crumbling pier roughly 200 yards through the terminal, out past the main waiting areas and ticket booths. 200 yards of hell, and I had one bullet left in my revolver. My M4 was a useless club. This was less a plan, more a desperate gamble against impossible odds. I gripped the revolver, its weight a cold comfort. My hand throbbed, a dull, agonizing ache, but the immediate threat overshadowed the pain. I needed to move fast, silently, and pray to a God I no longer believed in. I began to crawl, low to the ground, using the debris for cover. Shattered benches, overturned luggage carts, the remains of an exploded vending machine. Each inch was a victory, each moment of silence a terrifying reprieve. A particularly dense cluster of infected blocked my path to the next cover. Maybe 15 of them, packed close, swaying in unison, their backs mostly turned to me. I had to get past them. My eyes scanned the environment. A fire axe leaning against a broken emergency alarm box, perhaps 20 feet away. A long shot, but a powerful, silent weapon. I decided. One bullet in the revolver. That was for the biggest threat. The axe was for the immediate future. I pulled myself forward, inch by painful inch, making no sound. The floor was gritty with dust and dried fluids. The moaning of the infected was so loud, so constant, it was almost white noise. But my ears were trained to filter it, to pick out any subtle shift, any sign of their awareness. I reached the axe. My fingers closed around the cold, heavy metal. It was balanced, substantial. A grim satisfaction settled over me. This was a fighting chance. I rose slowly, axe in hand. The cluster of infected was still there, swaying. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This was going to be ugly. I charged, not silently, not subtly. I let out a guttural roar, a release of all the fear, all the despair, all the rage that had been building inside me for a year. It was a primal scream, a challenge to death itself. The infected reacted instantly. Their heads snapped towards me, their moans rising to a furious crescendo. They turned, a wave of gray flesh and grasping hands converging on me. I swung the axe. The blade bit deep into the neck of the first infected, severing its spine with a wet crack. It dropped. I spun, the axe a blur, burying it in the head of the second. It fell. A third was on me, its hands grasping at my face. I brought the axe handle up, slamming it into its jaw, knocking it back. I was in a frenzy, a desperate, animalistic fight for survival. The axe was heavy, but I swung it with all the strength I had left. It was a dance of death, a brutal, visceral ballet of flesh and steel. I cleaved, hacked, and battered, blood and black fluid spraying, the sounds of my effort mixing with the snarls and moans of the infected. For every one I dropped, 2 more seemed to rise. They were a relentless tide. My arms screamed in protest, my lungs burned. The sheer number was overwhelming. I was being pushed back, slowly but surely, towards the overturned kiosk. My wounded hand throbbed with excruciating pain, and I could feel new cuts, new scrapes, new tears in my uniform. I was bleeding. My vision was starting to blur at the edges. This was it. This was where I fell. Then a sound, a sharp, distinct bark from the left, a living sound. My head snapped towards it, a flash of movement in the chaos. A dog, a massive German shepherd, its teeth bared, its eyes wild with ferocity, tearing into the infected, carving a path towards me. "Buster!" a voice yelled, thick with desperation, from behind a stack of luggage. "Buster, get him!" Another survivor, and a dog. The dog, Buster, was a whirlwind of fur and teeth, snapping at necks, tearing at limbs, creating a small pocket of clean space around me. It was strong, disciplined, moving with a controlled ferocity that shocked me. The voice continued, "Alex, over here, come on." I recognized the voice. It was Zach, the man from the cruiser, the one who had gone quiet in the cell, the one who thought we were all going to die. He had made it. He was here. A surge of adrenaline, fresh and potent, coursed through me. I wasn't alone. I turned, axe still in hand, and fought my way toward Zach's voice. Buster, flanking me, snarled and tore, creating openings. Zack was behind a stack of airline luggage, a crudely fashioned spear in his hands, its tip sharpened rebar. He was pale, sweating, but his eyes held a fierce, desperate light. "Alex, thank God," he gasped, plunging his spear into the face of an infected that tried to climb over the luggage. "You're alive," I yelled, dropping another infected with a swing of the axe. "Where are Riley and Julie?" "Separated. They were with another group, tried to find a way—" "Oh, the Manhattan Bridge. I got separated in the chaos. Came here on a hunch, trying to get to a boat," he explained, pulling his spear free with a grunt. "Saw the dinghy." "One bullet," I yelled, "and this axe. We need to get to that dinghy." "No kidding," he screamed, his voice strained. "Buster, stay with Alex. Cover him." The dog, smart as hell, immediately shifted its position, placing itself between me and the bulk of the infected, snarling, keeping them at bay with furious lunges. It was buying us precious time. "Go, move," Zack yelled, gesturing towards the pier. "I'll cover you from here. Create a path. I'll follow." His shotgun was gone, but he was wielding that rebar spear like a veteran, stabbing, thrusting, keeping the infected at bay. He was no longer the defeated man from the cell. He was fighting, for Buster, for himself, for me. I didn't argue. With Buster's help, I had a chance. I moved, axe held high, cutting a brutal path through the dense mass of infected. It was a blur of motion, biting and tearing, creating an opening in the swarm. The dog was a force of nature, a loyal, terrifying engine of destruction. We reached the inner edge of the pier. The path to the dinghy was clear, maybe 50 yards of decaying wooden planks stretching out over the dark water. The swarm behind us was closing in, but Buster was a wall of fury, snarling, lunging, keeping them from surging onto the pier. "Go, Alex, go!" Zack screamed, his voice raw with effort. He was being overwhelmed, pushed back further into the luggage. "I'll try to hold them. Get to the dinghy. It's our only chance." I looked back. Zack was fighting like a demon, but he was losing ground. Infected were climbing over the luggage, lunging at him. Buster, exhausted, was still fighting, but his barks were growing weaker, his movements slower. "Buster, with me!" I yelled, reaching out my hand. The dog hesitated, looking at Zack, then at me. A moment of heartbreaking loyalty. Then, with a flick, infernal, furious snarl at the encroaching dead, it turned and ran, joining me on the pier. "No! Buster! Get back!" Zack screamed, his voice filled with despair. He had lost his cover. He was alone. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Zack was making a choice, a sacrifice, just like the man on the street. I ran, Buster at my heels. The pier swayed under our weight. The water below was black, terrifying. The dinghy, a small, dark shape, was still there, bobbing gently. But as I ran, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. A new hum. Not from the ferry, not from the bridge. This hum was deeper, louder, coming from beneath the pier, from the water itself. And then I saw it. Movement in the murky depths. Not fish, something massive, something pale and writhing. My last bullet. I clutched the revolver, my hand trembling. This wasn't over, not even here. The city, in its dying throes, still had new horrors to reveal. And the journey across the East River, it seemed, was only just beginning. Doug,